Hey there, everybody. This is Kristen from Teaching Balance, and I am here with you with this week's mindfulness meditation practice. And we are in the month of befriending the inner critic. I mentioned in one of our previous practices or recordings earlier this month that one of the things I really think is most powerful about our mindfulness practice is what I usually just off the cuff refer to as getting back into the driver's seat of your mind. Because if you're anything like me, sometimes it feels like you can get hijacked by worries and, ruminative thoughts about the past and, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's nice because you do get to become a little bit more self-aware, like out in the world, off the cushion, as we say, because of what we do on the cushion. It actually, it's like, it's so cliche, but, people who do practice for an athletic event, or, you're on a team and you're going to soccer practice, you're doing that to build up your skills, not just for that, but because of when you're out in the field of play, when it is the game itself. And so I guess I do really feel like that's a pretty apt metaphor. Now, not necessarily metaphor specific, but I was thinking a little bit about this whole theme, and actually the inspiration for choosing this theme from this month actually comes from a conversation that I had recently with a colleague who is also a education consultant, and his big thing is really just sort of like getting teachers pumped up again and getting their energy up and reigniting their enthusiasm and their optimism and all that kind of stuff. And we were just having a really candid conversation about how hard it is right now, and it's always been hard. And then COVID happened and testing happened and all these things happened, and it's even harder than it's ever been, in my humble opinion. Now, does that mean that, we should all just throw up our hands and give up? No, of course. However, what I do think is that even when things are at their worst, and that's a very big word, but even when things are quite bad, because he was sort of asking me about my perspective regarding like what's kind of, if you were to choose, what's the one big thing, one big piece of advice that you would give to teachers and honestly anyone. And my advice is, if you can't actually make the situation better, at least don't make it worse. And what I mean by that is not so much that Hippocratic oath, do no harm, but what I mean instead is, if you can't actually impact the external circumstances and you can just barely kind of hang on to do whatever you can as you got, sort of are navigating through the circumstances, professionally, personally, or whatever, it's useful, incredibly useful, for us to cultivate the self-awareness that I was talking about earlier, so that at least we're in the driver's seat of our minds and are not necessarily making it harder for ourselves through, for example, excessive rumination, or through making it worse through letting your inner critic just beat the crap out of you so that you don't even have the energy to continue to do whatever it is that you need to do, either in your life or your work. And so that's what I mean by that. So it doesn't mean that we can, that somehow you're magically like, everything's fine. Because of course that's not helpful either. But what it's really about is, at least I can be aware of what's going in my inner landscape so that I'm not making it harder for myself. I'm not making it harder by letting my, self-criticism drain my mental energy. I'm not making it harder by expending energy worrying about things that I literally can have zero control over. So that is what I mean by that. Now, this, of course, all connects to our theme of befriending your inner critic, because it's that self-awareness. It's the awareness of what's going on. Like, wow, okay, let's just take a time out here and see if we can shift this. You can shift it by doing that sort of befriending your inner critic, like, hey, I know you're trying to help here. I don't quite understand how you think this is helping, but I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to focus on what I have to do. I'm not going to give you energy. It's just, like I mentioned that week, it doesn't mean that, when you're talking about a parent and a child, you love the child, and through your love for them, you decide you're not going to let them eat candy all day because it's not in their best interest, that you're exercising your inherent capacity to say, you know what, I understand what you're doing, inner critic. I understand you think somehow this is helpful, but I'm in charge. I'm the parent here, and I am going to turn my attention elsewhere and not feed that, whatever it might be. So that's what I'm talking about. I know I said the same thing a couple different ways, but sometimes I find that that's helpful. So let's go ahead and cultivate that inner awareness, that self-awareness, that being in the driver's seat of our minds, which sometimes when we're sitting, it feels like it's not the case at all, that we're getting yanked left and right, up and down by our thoughts and everything else that's going on. But even if you have the most chaotic and not calm practice, it still is building those mindfulness muscles, so to speak, that allow you to navigate the big game, on the field of play of life, so that you're a little bit more skillful. And at least if you can't make a circumstance better, you're not making it harder for yourself. All right, 10 minutes. Let's do this. When you're ready, taking some of those deep breaths. Allowing yourself just to settle in. If you find that intro really stirred up some things for you, understanding that that's okay. And just like the little pieces of plastic snow in a snow globe, sometimes we get a little stirred up, agitated by what's going on. And that's okay. That's why we choose to have these moments of stillness, physical stillness, and theoretical mental stillness, so that those little pieces of plastic snow in the snow globe gradually float downward, and there's much more clarity through the water. As you're continuing to settle in, rest your attention on sounds or sensations of the breath. Allow yourself just to have a real gentleness to this practice. Sometimes we can drive ourselves a little harder than necessary. So whatever degree of effort you're bringing to today's practice, I'm going to invite you to just loosen it or lighten it, maybe 10%. And you can increase that later. But for right now, just 10% looser, 10% less effort. See how that affects your experience. Checking in where the mind is now. Noticing if it's wandered into thought. And remembering it's not a problem. Every time you notice that your mind has wandered, that is the mindfulness bicep curl. So you could even go so far as to say the more your mind wanders, the better you will develop your self-awareness, your mindful awareness. So it's never something to feel bad about. It's always something instead to be excited about. You noticed. You woke up for a moment from your thoughts. And we do that again and again and again as part of our practice. So for the last minute or so, let's go ahead and just sit together in silence until you hear the bell. All right, that's 10 minutes. As always, thank you so much for taking this time for yourself, and thank you for allowing me to accompany you on this journey. I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.